Okay, we're all right. Good evening and welcome to the HUUSD School Board meeting for January 8th, 2025. It is 5:30. We're starting early because we are going to make a motion in a second here to move into an executive session for a half an hour prior to our regular meeting. Can someone please make that motion?
Make a motion to go into executive session. Uh,
Bobby, can you read that suggested statement at the top of the
okay. I
agenda?
make a motion to enter into the executive session with all board members, Superintendent Dr. Mike, Director of Special Services John Berliner, and Director of Finance Lisa Essler for the purpose of confidential attorney-client communications made for the purpose of providing professional legal services to the body, as well as discussing labor relations agreements with employees, because premature public knowledge would clearly place the public body or person involved at a substantial disadvantage.
3 seconds. Is anyone going to object or abstain? We'll pass. We are going to go into executive session now. Everyone online, please go into your executive session breakout room. Call. Thank you. Welcome back to the school board meeting. We've had just come out of an executive session, and we are coming back out of that. We're gonna make a motion right now. Someone is to adjust our action items. Is that the wrong time to do it? Okay, Jay.
Public comment then.
Okay, I can do that I can do that. Sorry. We're gonna do public comment first. Okay, we have a few different people here for public comment, but first we're gonna hear from Beth Gravel.
Okay. Is this good? Okay. Thank you so much for having me. Good evening. I am Beth Gravel. I'm a high school math and science teacher here at Harwood, and a proud parent of a Moortown elementary student. And I am also serving on the executive committee of the Harwood Unified Education Association. So, on behalf of my fellow members, I want to reiterate our commitment to our schools, our community, our educators, and most importantly, our students. I know each of you on the board shares these commitments and try hard every day to do what's best for the children that we serve. One of the best ways to show your dedication is to put students first when crafting your budget. Like you, we don't want to have to hold multiple votes like we did last year. To prevent that from happening, we urge you to put students first. Determine what students need. Don't start the process with cuts in mind. We know the communities we serve share our dedication to our schools and students. They will support a budget that puts kids first. Last year, you cut 27 positions. Not only were these positions fellow community members, they were the folks who deliver programs our students need. Unfortunately, we see the potential for 20 more cuts this coming year. We implore you to reevaluate the effects these cuts will have on our students and on our students. We stand ready to help you identify what students need and what programs we must continue to offer. To that end, we are asking to be part of the process. You are already talking to administrators from each building about cuts. As frontline educators who work with students every day, we can give you a realistic assessment of the damage cutting programs and staff causes. Working together, we can chart a path forward with a proposed budget that puts students first. We trust the community will support the board's spending plan if they truly know that you have put their children at the forefront of the efforts. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. We appreciate that. Does anyone else over there want to speak? Please tell us your name when you.
Sorry, I'm getting over a really bad cold, so I'm going to try, and I know that you try to keep these to 3 minutes, so I'll try to keep it really focused here. My name is Macon Phillips, and I live in Warren, Vermont. I Vermont in 2020 with my wife to raise our children here in the Valley. We have a son in 6th grade and another in the 3rd grade and a daughter in the 1st grade. And I'm here tonight to advocate for a budget that prioritizes our students and protects their future, to support the remarks that Beth just made. But I also want to add a few other things. Last year, it took 3 votes to pass a budget after significant cuts that eliminated nearly 30 positions. And now it sounds like we're on track to eliminate 20 more. And I don't know how it's going to be any different next year. No one can tell me. And despite these efforts, taxes have just gone up, right? So I'm not telling you anything y'all don't know, but this is an intractable problem. So here's the key point. The way we protect our kids is by this board putting forward a budget that it believes is necessary to provide the best education possible for our children. That means taking in every factor, cost, programs, needs, communities, but it does not mean chasing a magic number that will never appease our loudest critics. The fact is that there is no magic number that will satisfy those who have made it their missions to see the budgets fail. Their goal is not to compromise here. It's creating headlines of rejected budgets to put pressure in Montpelier. That strategy really only hurts one group. My kids are in it. So let me express my deep disappointment with our state level officials in this matter. Much of what needs to be done requires authority beyond this room. Last year was outrageous when they sidestepped this debate, and I've seen nothing this year that's any different. But while we can't assume they'll help, we have to move forward. And here's what I suggest. Your focus must be on advocating for that budget in a way that builds trust and helps understanding of the role of this system in our community. And we need to look at a magic number. And that magic number is 2,700, or whatever it takes to have more yes votes than no votes. And I'm here to dedicate myself to that task. And I'm asking the board to communicate clearly and robustly about why this budget is good for our kids. Because I am tired of chasing magic numbers and talking about cutting ourselves into oblivion. My kids deserve a future, and you need to design it. And our state officials need to figure out how to fund it. So let's just be very clear about that. So I just want to end by saying thank you for this opportunity to come and vent some frustration. I know it's been frustrating for y'all. But our state officials are happy letting you fight it out with our neighbors while they dodge it. And that is unacceptable. But don't take the bait. You do your job, if I can be so bold. Tell me the budget we need to educate our children. That's your job. Not appeasing the Front Porch Forum tax hawks. All right? Put it together, make it clear, and we'll go out and build the support for it and get this thing done. Let's figure out other stuff somewhere else. This is about our kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being so passionate about it. We are too. And we are. You are. It definitely does. Thank you for saying it. We appreciate that. I think we do have some Zoom. Yep, raise your hand in Zoom if you want to be part of public comment. Does anyone else here want to say anything? No? Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, we're going to hear from Harmony Beldevo on a different subject. Unmute yourself. There you go.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can. Yep.
Okay. So I'm Harmony Beldevo, and I'm a 10th grader at Harwood. And Ms. Napper and Rachel, who are Harwood staff, and some students in the Community Action for Racial Equity Club, and I looked at the equity policy that the school board wrote, and we felt that the scope of the goals of the equity advisory team written in the equity policy seems like very large and time consuming. So we need to prioritize the most pressing and significant area of equity that affects many students, which is the discrimination, especially racism, that students experience at Harwood. this needs to be taken concrete action against. We feel that the time doesn't need to be taken to collect additional data because we already have evidence and experiences that support the action steps listed in the policy. So, the Harwood Community Action for Racial Equity Club has created 4 concrete steps for achieving anti-discrimination and equity at Harwood, and they are the following. 1. Teachers need to be trained to identify discrimination. 2. Students need to be educated on various cultures and anti-racism. 3. Students need to feel safe and supported by staff and students to report discrimination. And 4. There needs to be specific consequences for discriminatory harm caused by students. Thank you.
Thank you, Harmony. We really appreciate that while we're in this equity policy time. Thank you very much. Anyone else for public comment? Okay, thank you. Moving on. All right. Next, we're going to approve the agenda, but first we're going to amend the agenda. JB, do you want to read the language on the amendment, and can you put up a tally sheet, please?
I'd like to move that the board approve the agreement with the family for the provision of educational services and other matters as discussed in executive session.
You want to amend the agenda?
Yes, so, yeah.
To include.
A motion to amend the agenda to include approval of the agreement with the family for the provision of educational services, other matters as discussed in executive session, and authorize the superintendent to execute the agreement.
We don't have to do a roll call. Do we have any abstentions or no votes for this?
Actually, is this where I'm voting that I'm abstaining, or at the actual vote?
This is where you're abstaining. Yep.
Yes, I'm abstaining due to a conflict.
All right, so Mike abstains. And anyone else, anything else? Otherwise, it'll pass.
Second to the motion.
Second to the motion from Bobby, sorry. All right, I think we're good.
Okay.
Without any objections or additional abstentions, that will pass. Yeah, now we're going to vote to approve the whole agenda. Do we have a motion?
Approve the agenda?
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Right. Okay. The agenda is amended to add that to our action items. Next, we're going to go to board reports. For the leadership report, the only thing of significance is I really would like the board to think about ways our student reps can be part of our conversation and information we might want them to glean from the school, from the kids in school. And if you have ideas for that, you can talk to me and Cindy, and we can filter that down to the kids and see what we can work on with them.
Okay.
Other than that, superintendent, are you speaking in this one? You're not superintendent.
Happy to take any questions. This is the week that I don't have a written report, but I do want to let the board know that I received from the Vermont School Board Association a letter and some pamphlets that they've produced about thinking about serving on your school board. It's an excellent pamphlet for members of our public, especially as I know many of you are talking about whether or not to run for re-election. So
Right.
I'll pass them around, and if anyone's interested, but take one and provide it to anyone in the community who you think may be interested. And we can get more if we need to. So I'll look. We're enclosing 10 copies of the newest Thinking About Serving in Your School Board. If you'd like more, please don't hesitate to ask. This is our introductory pamphlet for prospective school board members. In the past, this brochure has been helpful to people. I can ask the PSBA person. It doesn't say whether it's online or not. I would hope it would be.
Have any board reports from anyone? I don't believe we do. No. All right. So go ahead, Steve.
I'll
Ashley?
pretend part of an outreach.
Hey, Mike, could I ask Mike if somebody could drop off some of those packets at the Duxbury Town office?
Sure. The what?
You guys hear me?
We can work on that. Go ahead, Steve.
Okay. I just wanted to mention that as part of outreach activities, Ben and I were invited by the select board at Moortown to discuss what we could say about the budget. This was last Monday, and this was just a very good opportunity. I thought the discussion went very well, and the select board was quite interested to know what we thought was going to happen. So I would encourage other board members to get themselves invited to their select board meetings.
Good idea. Thanks. All right. Well, the very next piece is budget discussion. Can you see her presentation? Great. That's
Well, while Tori pulls that up, I shared my presentation with everybody. Excuse me. I am still working with the budget target of a 2.75% year-over-year increase. What I've done is just updated the numbers. There are still many things that are outstanding. I'm looking at the long-term ADM, long-term weighted average daily membership. We're waiting for V4. So our numbers haven't changed, but that could change. I did receive the CLAs, and I've updated that, and we'll go through that. I'm also waiting for some additional revenue numbers that I've plugged in, but those numbers could change and increase. So if you recall, we have a 70% increase in our revenue, and I'm hoping that's going to go up. Some of the numbers that I'm still outstanding, I normally would have received in late December. For instance, our early essential revenue, which we receive about $197,000. I'm looking for that to be increased in fiscal year 26. I've budgeted the actual of what we receive. We're projected for 25, but that number has not come out, and a few other revenue numbers have not come out. AOE is a little behind schedule with Nicole Lee leaving her position and Brad James taking over. They're a little behind on getting numbers to us. But so our revenue number has a potential of going up, and are hoping that we can finalize our long-term weighted average. That could change our picture. If you go to slide 3. So in looking at our target number of what the board had provided of a year-over-year 2.75% increase, the newest projected numbers you'll see is proposed fiscal year 26 is our target number. The next slide, you'll show the difference between what I presented on December 18th and today, but I'm seeing there's been a lot of changes in the overall operations of puts and takes, increases and decreases. So there has been a lot of changes. There's been some increases that I had to account for. So we are looking at reducing more wages of labor. So we've been discussing a possible FTE reduction of 16 to 20 FTEs. We're still waiting to solidify the final numbers on those FTEs. As a reminder, we have our retirement incentive letter is due next week. We still have we have 7 outstanding notifications of whether they're going to accept that or not. So there's a potential of more retirements right now. We have 3 that have accepted, and we've asked the board, if you recall, we've asked for 5 retirements to incentivize 5 retirements. And we have still waiting the final numbers for next year on January 15th. So that's very fluid. We're also looking at, things change in terms of resignations and retirement. So that number again can change. So right now, our proposed budget, where I'm at right now, you'll see the category changes. There were some savings that I've plugged in here in terms of our transportation contract. I'm hoping to achieve a savings in our transportation contract. There were some other agreements that we just discussed in the executive session that we had to be added. So there's things that are netting out. So the overall, you'll see there's actually a larger reduction in our FTEs and our wages of labor. If you go to slide 4, you'll see the difference between what I presented on December 18th versus today's number. Still working with that target of 2.75. On January 22nd, at our board meeting, I will have the final budget numbers to present, and then I'll give you more detail by category in terms of how that works out, whether it be within instructional, special ed, and I'll have it broken down in different categories so you can see versus the large bucket of categories that I'm showing here. If you look at column slide 3 and 4, you'll see there's a column that says 12, 18, 24, and you look at the different numbers. So for instance, our projection for wages of labor that I presented for reduction for salaries was 25.6 million. Now I'm projecting, and on January 8th, today's would be 24.9 million. So but I'm on slide 4, I'm just showing you what we presented on December 18th. There's a different column. So I'm just comparing what I presented for you for your convenience versus how those categories change. And again, remember, the budget is very fluid. There's puts and takes. Things are being added and things are being reduced constantly. So looking at where the reductions are and how the changes are, each time I come to you, view 1, view 2, view 3, there's always difference of numbers. I'm hoping to have the finalized budget on January 22nd. To be able to present to the board and either vote on it that night or on the possible scheduled 29th meeting. So again, at a 2.75% year-over-year increase, and with continuing with the projected number I have of a 7% increase in revenue, our educational spend will be a 2% year-over-year increase. Our equalized pupil has not changed through Vision 3, so our cost per pupil has stayed the same since my last presentation of December 18th. So our cost per pupil is $15,483, and the estimated excess spending threshold for our cost per pupil using the equalized pupil number is 15,926. So as a reminder, we're very close to that excess spending threshold. The yield has been set with the stated adjustment yield of 8,553. We won't have the finalized yield number until the end of the legislature session and towards the end of May. With our taxing capacity discount, which was adjusted for that statewide of adjustment, our district tax rate would be $1.71. If you go to the next slide. Here, I'm just telling you that even though we're having a year percent, I've talked about this in the past, even though we're having a 2.75% year over year in our educational spending, it nets out to be only a 2% increase in our educational spend ask from the state. Next slide. So I received the CLAs and the actual CLAs and the town adjusted, the statewide adjustment. So you'll see you'll see the adjustment where it says fiscal year 26 SACLA, that's a state adjustment for the CLA. So if you take our district tax rate and then you plug in all the adjusted rates using the statewide adjustment, you'll see the implication, the hypothetical implication, because the yield is not set. So I'm saying hypothetical until the yield is set. These would be the potential tax rates in the towns based on what we know today. You'll see Facein has, I'm sorry, Mike, did you want to? Okay. You'll see Facein there seems to be, an influx in Facein, because you'll see there was a 10% change, a 21 cents change in Facein. Their CLAs dropped in fiscal year 26 from 71% down to 54.79% projected for fiscal year 26. And with the statewide adjustment, it brings it back up to 75.72%. So that's why there's a major drop in Facein projected CLA for fiscal year 26.
And that's what I was going to say. I had some questions. Why Facetin's number was different from the rest, even though if you look in the column that says for the adjustment by town, Facetin's very similar to Waitsfield, Warren, and Waterbury, but what this chart does not have is the CLA from fiscal year 24. And that's where the big change occurs, and that's why their tax rates are different than the rest.
Okay. Any questions? Okay.
Go ahead, Elizabeth. You're muted.
I am on mute. Thank you. Lisa, do you have an update on the Truex engagement and when we'll have that information? Will we have that information in hand for some of our informational meetings? I know that doesn't impact this year's budget, but I think it would be important for people to understand as we're looking at a multi-year view.
We have a meeting, a building use and visioning committee meeting on Thursday. We will be having that forthcoming, but we don't have any updated information at this point right now.
So they did not commit to a delivery date for their assessment?
Oh, they did. We have it early February.
Okay, thank you.
Final report should be issued by January 31st.
Thank you.
So I wanted to just go over some of the cost drivers as a reminder. I plugged in some of the cost driving. We've updated it in the past where it was red, it wasn't finalized. And going back and looking at most of these numbers, I've finalized most of these numbers. So these were the cost drivers of our increases. So if you recall, we were reducing over $2.4 million in our overall educational expenses to be able to meet a 2.75% year over year increase. I've mentioned there were an increase in special education of 19% for district services. In particular, sped ed transportation went up, trash removal went up. I mean, things across the board went up. So trying to achieve cost containment in a lot of areas was very difficult in terms of meeting the increases throughout all the different categories. I actually went with all of our administrators line by line, all the budget items, and to be able to see where we can reduce across each line item. So again, at the next presentation on January 22nd, I will also be able to share a line item budget with the final budget. The overall budget reductions, large bucket budget reductions, we are looking at 16 to 20 FTEs, a possible. I'm hoping to there are some vacancies that we're looking to eliminate. So it'll be affecting less actual head counts of employees, and I'll have the detail of that information at the next meeting. So within that 16 to 20 positions, there will be some vacancies that we will be eliminating. We are looking at achieving a $225,000 transportation cost reduction. I've been able to reduce $135,250 in building operations, $35,000 in instructional costs working with all the principals. And we've been able to, even though there were significant increases in technology, software, and hardware subscriptions and memberships, we've been able to achieve a $38,222 library and technological expense reductions. One thing that we are looking at is not continuing summer academies. Over the past year, in fiscal year this past summer, our summer academy was actually transferred to our ESSER funding. We used all of our residual ESSER funding to pay and was budgeted for out of our ESSER funding. So that cost of $325,000, because it wasn't budgeted in fiscal year 25, would be an increase to pull that money back on to the general fund. So we are not looking to continue our summer academies. However, we will continue with extended year services, which we've budgeted for. But we are looking not to continue summer academies, which would have been a cost of $325,000.
Hearing more about that. How many students are impacted? What are summer academies? What is extended year? Help us.
This is our Mad River Academy, which is held at Waitsfield, and also our academy that's held at Brookside. And this past year, we were also able to extend at Crosset Brook. We had a half-day summer academy. We can provide a lot more detail, but we're not going to be able to, we won't have the funding to be able to continue the summer academies. We've expanded that over the last couple of years during COVID. Prior to that, I believe it was only at Brookside. It was very, right.
So the summer academies provide opportunities for students to engage in social and academic supports over the summer. So the summer academy started as an extension of what Lisa talked about, which is extended school year services. That is specific to students who are on an IEP. It's part of their plan. And through COVID and the recognition that there's other students who would benefit from that, and the reality that it can be very challenging for families and parents to bring their child to school in the summer for an hour in the middle of the day. The academy is allowed a larger amount of time, more opportunity for students to interact with each other, build social skills in more natural environments, if that was, and then also for the students who were receiving ESY services through their IEP to receive them during that time. It also allowed us to consolidate a little bit. So instead of Moortown needing to figure out their summer ESY services in Waitsfield, and there was one within the Valley and then one at Brookside as well. I can go into more detail too, but does that give you a pretty decent overview? I can.
But you can go and I'll pull that up for you. There's other questions.
And like Lisa said, we still will be fulfilling our obligations to provide those extended school year services to the students who qualify for them through their individualized education program.
John, could you just address how did students gain access to the summer academies? Was it completely voluntary or teacher recommendation or?
Definitely voluntary. But students who were the general way of getting an invitation because it was not required, was if you were a student who was receiving some type of support or intervention during the school year. So not just a student who had an IEP, but a student who had a Section 504 support plan or was receiving some intervention or remediation through the larger MTSS multi-tiered system of supports, or sometimes called the EST educational support team, was the general way that that happened. It took place for 3 weeks. I think it was usually the last 2 weeks of July and first week of August, but depending on the dates, it shifted a little bit sometimes, and was for most of the day. I don't know if it equaled exactly a school day, but
Huh.
52 students for the academy. More students were invited. Always more students are invited than participate, just because of their summer plans for families.
52 students in the Mad River Academy.
Mad River and the Eagle Academy is what they called the one at Brookside, and this was just for the elementary students. Last year piloted the middle school program, so those numbers were not surprisingly a little bit lower, I think, both because it was new for the middle school last year and because what we've seen and what I've seen in other schools that I've worked in is the older students get, the less likely they are to participate in summer, even if we don't call it summer school, going to school in some way in the summer. And at Harwood, it's really just extended school year services for students on IEP, and the number of students who actually participate in that is fairly low because of all those reasons, generally speaking.
On an IEP and you need summer school, you get it still. That's what you just said. If it's in your IEP, you're still going to get it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
We still do have extended year service budgeted. We just won't have the academies, the expanded academies. Any questions?
Steve?
Yeah. I was wondering, Warren used to have what they call the summer learning program, which was separately supported. It was kind of like a summer day camp, but it wasn't all summer. It's been years since I've been involved, but that was kind of run like the after school program. I mean, it was something, it was optional and voluntary, but I just wonder if doing something like that, which could be funded maybe outside of the school budget, could then be a place where kids, so in other words, if you have something, I don't know if any such thing exists anywhere in any of the schools. I guess I'm asking whether that still exists. The Warren Summer Learning Program. Ashley might remember what it.
Yeah, I ran that program for a couple of years. It is, I'm not sure they're still doing the summer program like the summer camp at Warren, but
Yeah.
I know they do, um, one-on-one tutoring, and
Right.
people book it with certain teachers. I know they're still doing that. Lisa?
So that is correct. That we're not currently doing that. But what I did fail to mention is that we are looking to do something else possibly in future summers. So, with the existing program now, we can't afford to be able to move that cost back onto the general budget, the general fund, and that cost has increased. We, again, during COVID, we expanded the academies because we were able to fund them out of ESSER funding. But we are looking to be able to see what we can do in the future and other possibilities for some type of summer programming. And that's something that it's on our list to do, to look at.
I was just, I'm just kind of thinking that as parents, with some of the parents we've heard tonight and concerns about putting our kids first, and I know that there are some creative solutions that could like that maybe could work, so that the kids who are getting the special services during the summer could be plugged into maybe other things going on if they're, while their parents are working or so forth. But just trying to, ease the the shock when things start disappearing.
Thank you, Bobby. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I wanted to address some of the comments we heard during public comment. Uh, I mean, we are all here because we put students first, and we're tasked with the job of coming up with kind of a dreadful budget. Uh, I do understand that uh, teachers maybe would like more input, but of course there's a problem with confidentiality issues uh, when cuts are discussed. But I do understand that teachers, in many senses, are the experts on what's most vital for the kids in our district. I'm just putting it out there, wondering with no solution in mind of if there's a way to engage teachers earlier on in budget discussions in a way that doesn't violate confidentiality. I'm just putting that out as a question.
And I can just address kind of our conversation so far, and we really value, we appreciate the public comment earlier. We value the input of our teachers. I do meet once a month with the union leadership, the association leadership. Lisa, I asked them if I could invite Lisa last month. The last 2 months, Lisa's given budget updates, and part of our conversation is how can we better engage the teaching staff to get ideas and suggestions. Our monthly meeting is coming up this coming Monday, and we were invited to the Harvard Unified Education Association's executive committee that was mentioned by Beth next Thursday. So Lisa and I are both attending that on Thursday. We are looking for as much input and ideas as we can.
I appreciate that, both of you.
Recognizing that this is preliminary still with yield and V4 and different things still to come out, but can you offer maybe a little historical perspective on the property tax increase, decrease? Like, have we in recent times had a property tax decrease? Is this a novel thing?
Everything is not final. But yes, there, do you know? Well, yes, I'm sorry. Yes, yes. So yes, that can happen. And with the statewide adjustment, do you want to?
Well, and just tying in a little bit of the work that I'm on with the Commission on Future of Public Education. One of the one of the items we talk about with Vermont, one of the complexities of our system is that amount varies every year. I came from a state where there was a consistent property tax that may have increased up to a certain percentage every year, but because of the way we fund public schools, where all the school districts, 50 some school districts independently pass budgets. They send the total to Montpelier, to the education fund, and then the state looks at what that total is of costs, what they have in the education fund, and then what needs to happen to adjustments every year. That number goes up and down. Another complexity is the income sensitivity with the number of people who qualify, and that's a moving target every year. So you see a greater fluctuation in our property tax system than you do in many other states.
Thing I just want to add is my colleagues, we've all kind of pulled together of what very preliminary of what our district's educational ask will be, our educational spend. And what I'm seeing right now, not all have reported, but I'm seeing very low numbers and sticking to the governor's recommendation of 3% or less increase. So again, those are not finalized. Most of, only a few districts have reported, but what I'm seeing is an average of 2.5% to 3.5% increase for their educational spend. So knowing that these the educational requests budgets are coming in lower than the previous year. That also changes the picture as well in terms of what is needed to fund the education.
Any other questions? Zoom land? Life?
So at the next meeting, I understand we're going to hear more about impacts. Is that right? I'd be particularly interested. I remember when we were setting numbers and we were thinking kind of 2.75 or was it going to be 3 or something like that. And just being reminded that the governor had recommended 3, and then hearing from you, a lot of folks are coming in more like 3.5. I'd be interested in the next meeting to just know, what we could claw back if we were to move it to 3. Means is certainly something that concerns me from an equity standpoint and for some of our most vulnerable students. But again, as Steve said, and as Mike and you plan to do, working with the union next week to understand impacts more, I'd just be very first move might be if we were to look at something.
I just want to be cautious of that. Not all, that was a very early preliminary number, so I saw low numbers. One thing I just also want to caution us on, and of course, how everything impacts our students, but also our cost per pupil and that excess spending threshold. So we're very close to that number, and if that yield number changes, so I want to just keep reminding everybody about that.
Along with that, Lisa would have the exact numbers, but our district is one of the higher cost spending districts in the state. And that's where the excess spending threshold has an impact, particularly as we start losing the taxing capacity, the discount that we've been given, that we are looking, we have to be careful of our total budget number in the end. My job is to look out for the educational needs, and that's something we take very seriously. We also have to make sure that we're taking a look at what our overall staffing levels are and percentages, because we also don't want to be heavily impacted one year. Last year, the district, the board made the decision to move forward with a level services budget because the board last year felt that they were the services that were needed. And that was the first budget that was rejected. We made reductions. The second budget was impacted. So we've tried to balance the educational needs with what the bottom line would be for potential tax increases. Again, one of the pieces that I've talked about with other superintendents is just talking to the boards about the impact of adding to the budget. We were asked by the state as part of their projected yield for the December 1st tax commissioner level to let the state know what our boards were talking about at the time, which is the number that Lisa provided. If 50 districts were to add $1 million to their budgets, that would be an additional $50 million pulling on the education fund when we know there's challenges already. So we really have to make sure that we're balancing our educational priority with the fact that we know for the next 3 to 4 years, we're going to continue to be into challenging budget times.
Dan?
Do we have an idea yet if or what the impact is in the threshold?
18%. If you go above that, it's 118% penalty. Let me pull up the actual note.
Question, Dan. What does that mean? 118%. Hold on, everybody. Lisa's looking something up. Any other questions, comments right now?
Well, I liked what Steve said about going back to when he said he talked to the select board, and I wonder if there were specific things they were interested in. We might be able to put together some kind of discussion sheet to bring if we do talk to our select boards, what would be useful.
Uh, I thought they were very interested to hear that a level service budget would have been a 7% increase and we were coming in at 2.75. I think that, we've heard these figures so many times that we think everybody knows them, but that didn't seem to be the case. And I thought it was good to have a discussion on, again, subjects we know very well, what we can control and in our budget and what we can't, and how we're kind of at the mercy of the legislature for many items, and the fact that no matter what the legislature does this session, it probably won't take effect until at the earliest fiscal year 26. So I thought that were the main points. Ben, was there something else?
No, I think you described it well.
About how long did you do like 15 minutes or what, 10 minutes? What kind of
10 minutes.
10 minutes. Okay. Thanks.
They have questions for you, or did you lead off with a statement or something?
We led off with a little statement, but then it was mostly questions. So, for example, one question I remember is they said, what about maintenance? And what improvements are you going to make to the schools? Are you going to improve the science labs and things like that? And I said, no, we're doing just kind of emergency repairs as needed. And the $19 million in deferred maintenance figure, that was pretty shocking to them.
I think what was really neat about that was we often sort of get locked into this sort of not groupthink, but we get locked a lot into this holistic thinking about where we are from a district perspective, and it really does bring home this idea of we're representing our individual towns, and it was great to kind of go back to the thought of touching base with just specifically Moortown and saying, hey, this is where we're at with the school board. This is where we're at with taxes. It was great to see that we were on the same page, and that their questions had a lot of answers that we could easily answer from them, but also that by the end of things, we were just very grateful to them, and they were very grateful to us, and it was a real collaborative spirit. So we highly recommend that you all do it with your towns.
Just a comment again, just from a kind of a statewide perspective. I think one of the pieces that is important to remind our communities is that we have a shared system of education in Vermont, and that the taxes we collect locally for homesteads and non-homesteads, full-time residents and people who have homes, second homes, rentals, that we pay to fund all schools. So I think Lisa presented the number that of all the taxes collected in, I think, 2023, 83% of those funds stayed in our school districts, our 6 towns, and the other 17% went to help fund other school systems that do not have the same kinds of property. So that's one important piece. And then on the piece that Steve and Ben mentioned with facility costs, just from a report we heard from the State Commission, it's estimated that in the next 20 years, schools in the state of Vermont have deferred that there will be needed to be an investment in the neighborhood of $6,352,000. So the maintenance needs we're seeing locally are multiplied throughout the state. But that's, from what we were told, that was likely an undercount. But we're looking at $6.3 billion statewide in deferred maintenance and capital maintenance needs the next 20 years.
I have a question. A little while ago, when we were talking about how any bond expenditures, if you have to do a bond in your school, right now, the way it's written, that cost immediately attaches to the cost per pupil. But we heard sort of a scuttlebutt that might change. Has that changed at all?
Has not changed, and one of the reasons that the Ways and Means Committee added that is they did not want to encourage bonds until there was a statewide system on funding and priorities of building needs. So currently, if we were to have a bond, that would count towards our cost per pupil and would certainly put us over the excess spending threshold.
So the excess spending threshold is the excess educational threshold has been reinstated for fiscal year 26. The excess spending threshold for fiscal year 26 will be 118% above the statewide average district per pupil educational spend plus the fiscal year 25 NEEP inflation. And what happens is if you exceed by 118%, the penalty for exceeding the excess spending threshold is double taxation of the amount above the per pupil of the 118%. So it's for every $1 spent, then it would be taxed $2. So that's the preliminary over the threshold. Correct.
$1 over?
It would be.
That would be helpful. So I'm sorry, can you just, if we go over by $1 per student, that dollar is taxed at $2.
Correct.
So explain what the 118% is then.
It's anything above if you go over 118% of the
threshold.
The threshold of the state average, and the state average is 15,983
Right.
something.
So we're very close
We're
to
very
that
close there.
118% of the state average.
Right.
And so is that sort of like a state move to that directly correlating any kind of physical plant work to the cost per pupil? That is another sort of like school board under the bus moment, right? Yeah.
About adding the capital, yes.
Changed, and it probably won't change now that.
Right. Anything prior to fiscal year 26 is not included in your cost per pupil. Any new debt is included in your cost per pupil.
And then also just to point out, tomorrow is the governor's inauguration, and the governor and Secretary of Education have made it clear that education will be a priority. So we're expecting to hear more information tomorrow on what will be in the plan that he's sharing with the legislature. Again, from our conversations with the commission, we know that this will be a major driver, that there's going to be a lot of bills being proposed related to education funding. One of the topics discussed in depth, and we heard a hour-long report this past Monday, is on foundation formula and how a foundation formula could be implemented in Vermont. We know that's something that they're discussing, and that would certainly the foundation formula would be a calculation that would be, here is the amount that is the adequacy amount for school districts. And the state will fund you at that level, and anything over that level would need to be voter approved for that higher spending level. And again, it's a concept now. The people that are advising the Agency of Education have worked with states across the nation to implement this, and I'm not advocating for this, but I'm saying it is a serious conversation, and for districts that are above the 100% average that Lisa mentioned, it's one of the things that would keep me up at night.
Okay, do we have any more questions for Lisa? bringing us up to date here? If we do not, I think we're going to move on now to our action items. Okay. Thank you, Lisa, and thanks for keeping it up with it all and keeping us abreast of it all. Thank you. Our next point on the agenda is action items. The following are what we are looking to approve. Approve the HUUSD notice of availability of the annual report and FY25 budget. Do you want to talk about that?
That's a notice that the board provides yearly to our residents. A postcard is mailed out saying that for fiscal year 26, that the budget and the annual report will be available by February 14th this year, and that information can be accessed. And then also this information, I've already been reached out to by a number of towns asking for the statement because they include that on the information they send out to their town residents.
Go ahead, Tori.
Can we suggest edits or no? Yeah.
This is just updated from the wording that the board approved last year. So if you have any suggestions that you want to discuss.
Yeah, I would suggest so it says in accordance with Article 9 of the Harwood Unified Union School District organizational meeting held on August 31st, 2016. I would suggest just referencing, I'm gonna have to stop sharing my screen to get it, sorry. 16 VSA section 563, 10, subsections to 10 and subsection 11C. Oops, yeah, I can't switch between those, sorry. Okay, no, you're good, you're good. We'll wait until it appears back on the screens. Okay, so this section right here, because that Article 9 of that organizational meeting just references that statute section, and I think it would look a lot cleaner and less confusing if we just reference the statutes as a consideration.
Well, okay, Tori, if you want to do it that way, it sounds like we can probably replace that with this little statute number. Okay. Dr. Mike will put that in the notes.
What's the statute? Thank you.
She's been looking at these sorts of things for a little while for us. Okay, thank you with that little edit. We're going to approve that plus
I move to approve that with my requested edit.
The rest of it is familiar. It is the policy. We're going to approve for adoption the F36 emergency medication and G15 equity policy. I'm approve for deletion the F6 student medication policy. Oh, we have to do each one. Okay, sorry, my bad. Okay, so the first, second from JB. Do we have any objections or abstentions to passing the annual report notification piece? Without hearing any or seeing any, that will pass. Next is the policy adoption that I just mentioned, F36 and G15. And for the deletion of F6 from student medication. Do we have a motion?
Sure. Motion to approve.
Okay, and the second? That's him. Okay, JB, Bobby motion, JB second. Any objections or abstentions? That will pass. Okay, then we need to approve the added item that we've added at the end of our executive session, which I don't have the.
Didn't we?
Move to approve the agreement with the family for the provision of educational services and other matters as discussed in executive session and authorize superintendent to execute the agreement.
B seconded that. Do we have any objections or abstentions?
Ashley, I'm abstaining again.
Okay, Mike is abstaining. Mike Bishop. Thank you, Mike. Without hearing any others, that will pass. Okay. The very last piece is our consent agenda, which is comprised of the following. We're going to approve the minutes from 12/18. We're going to approve the First Student Inc. contract as selected transportation provider for a 3-year contract for Daniel Sargent, who's present, from FY26 through FY28, as per the transportation bid results of the RFP discussed on 12/18 board meeting, and authorize Lisa Essler to sign that contract. We are also going to approve the 12/18 warrants in the amount of $780,699.96. We are going to appoint Asher Berg as an advisory, non-voting member of the Outreach Committee, and approve the HUMHS field trip request to the New England Music Festival on which is March 13th through the 15th of this year. Do we have a motion?
Consent agenda as written.
Do we have a second? Tori seconds. Do we have any objections or abstentions from the consent agenda?
Thank you, Ellie.
It's a music festival that a bunch of musicians from our department auditioned for and got accepted into. And it's New England wide, so it's a pretty prestigious festival.
Where is it?
Oh, due to like the regulations, it switches around. Last year it was in Connecticut. This year, I don't know if they've sent out the location. I mean, then it's in Connecticut again.
Thank you,
Yep.
Ellie. All right. Did we already do this? Do we have any objections? Do we have a motion?
I object. Connecticut is not New England.
I'd like a recap of that trip in the next student report. when
Yeah, we want to
available.
hear all about that from somebody who was at it.
Okay.
Wow, that was enthusiasm right there. All right, without any objections or abstentions, that too will pass. Thank you to everyone who came to our meeting tonight, in addition to the board, and I'm looking for a motion to
Motion to adjourn.
Adjourn.
Second.
Second from Ben. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.